Welcome to the IEP Implementation Middle School module. The purpose of this module is to consider all the parts and pieces that go into planning for individual students following the eligibility and IEP process. How does a teacher go about setting up a program to implement the IEP for students? How do student needs drive the planning process? Let's take a look. At the end of this module, teachers will increase their understanding of how to implement the IEP by planning for instruction, selecting methodology or evidence-based practices, setting up instructional groups and schedules, designing classroom spaces, setting up a data collection system, collaborating with teachers and related service providers, and training their support staff. This graphic illustrates the decision-making process. This module focuses on IEP implementation, which includes using information gathered from assessment and IEP goals to determine point of student need, and then selecting appropriate methodologies or evidence-based practices to address goal deficits. Implementation in this process graphic refers to the degree of fidelity to the evidence-based practice selected, used in planning for instruction. Teachers use progress monitoring to determine whether the instruction is adequate for the student to make progress towards his or her IEP goals. This is our featured middle school teacher. Throughout the module, Desiree discusses what IEP implementation looks like in her classroom setting. Desiree will tell us a little bit about herself in this video segment.
My name is Desiree Rivera. I teach in Caldwell School District at the middle school level. Right now, I am the lead special education teacher for our team behavior program. We work with students with emotional disabilities like emotional disturbance, oppositional defiant, and some students that are on the spectrum. I also have experience working in the extended resource room at this level as well.
Next, let's talk about planning. Successful IEP implementation begins with planning. The old adage, failure to plan is planning to fail, applies here. Our students deserve our very best efforts, but where do we begin? Desiree discusses how she considers the whole child in her planning for instruction. She discusses student strengths and weaknesses, motivators, grade level standards, and goals.
When planning for instruction, I look at what the goal of the instruction is. I consider grade level standards first because that's what's happening in the general education classroom, and that's where we eventually want students to be. So I try to make that instruction accessible to the student, and then I focus on within that skill, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses. So their IEP goal, I look at within the lens of the general education standards. I also look at motivators for the students. Their interest and what makes them happy plays a huge role in what they're going to be capable of. For example, if a student's struggling to decode a 4th grade level text but is in the 8th grade, I would look at what's happening in the 8th grade classroom, and I would use those concepts when reading 4th grade level text. So if they're trying to cite evidence, I would do the same thing at a 4th grade level. We also consider their emotional state, the tone of what your instruction is, what their tone is, body language, their skill level, their social skills level. So it's kind of a whole child piece.
The thread of information identifies specific needs for each student. The thread starts at referral, continues in evaluation and eligibility documents, and should be found in the IEP. On the decision process graphic, assessment and IEP goal are indicated on the upper right. Let's take a look at the documents where you'll find the thread of information to begin planning for your students. Within the eligibility report, the summary of evidence has 3 parts: the evaluation team's assessment summary, adverse effect on educational performance, and the need for specially designed instruction. In this training example, let's look at the thread found in Simone's eligibility report. On Simone's assessment summary in the academic achievement section, Simone scored at the 4th percentile on word attack skills in the area of reading. She struggled to decode multisyllabic words and words that didn't follow common phonics patterns. The emotional, social, behavioral assessments indicate changes in task demand and working memory will impact Simone in reading tasks. Her classroom observation indicated that she was off task 60% of the time in a 5-minute time sample, and frequently asked to leave class during reading instruction. The full report, that you don't see on this slide, shows she has a medical diagnosis of ADHD with the doctor's name and date listed. The information in the assessment summary clearly outlines that Simone is eligible for special education by meeting the criteria for other health impairment. Disability criteria, or Prong 1, is part of the thread, and Prongs 2 and 3 also give us other parts of the thread of information needed to understand Simone's story. Section B, Adverse Effect on Educational Performance, or Prong 2, reports Simone has deficits in her ability to decode and read words fluently, leading to difficulty understanding what she has read. Further, C, the need for specially designed instruction, or Prong 3, Simone needs to be taught decoding strategies. She needs direct instruction and impulse control along with self-monitoring skills to help her focus in small groups within the special education classroom. The thread of information is present in all 3 parts of the summary of evidence, outlining Simone's unique learning profile. Now let's take a look at how the thread flows into the IEP. When looking at Simone's PLAF, or present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, information from her evaluation report flows into the disability affect statement on the IEP. This part of the IEP concerns the way her disability is preventing her from learning in the skill area of reading. Because Simone requires frequent adult redirection during whole group instruction, her disability adversely affects her ability to learn new content and skills. Additionally, she has deficits in decoding words and reading fluently that impact her ability to understand and gain meaning from what she reads. So knowing these things, we can clearly state the student need. Simone needs to increase her ability to read multisyllabic words to access her grade level content across all areas. Next comes the baseline data. Given a 3rd grade level reading list of multisyllabic words, Simone currently reads 26 out of 75 words correctly. And her annual goal on that same 3rd grade level list, she will read 65 out of 75 words correctly, as measured by weekly reading probes in 1 year's time. Simone's thread or story is evident in her eligibility report, and the information flows into her PLAF and goal, helping us to plan her instruction. Let's listen to Desiree describe the way she uses the thread of information in her planning.
Typically, when you are considering instruction for a student, there is a thread that carries over from their eligibility, and it may be from previous eligibilities as well, into their IEP. And it can be something, it's not typically a skill. Usually it's something like processing speed, or comprehension is something that they struggle with, or they have some significant behavior needs. I try to find strengths that balance those weaknesses. For example, a student might struggle with comprehending sixth grade level text, but they have a slow processing speed as well, and that's the thread that I'm looking at. So the information should be condensed to make it accessible. They may also need to express their thoughts verbally or in some different manner instead of in writing. This avoids the student focusing on the skill of writing and the skill of trying to understand the new concept. So the thread that I'm looking for, it's going to vary with every student, but it is pretty consistent across their eligibility report and any outside medical findings, and should carry over into their IEP.